Namaskar, welcome to Accountable Hindustan, where we explore bold ideas that can make India and the world fairer, more transparent, and progressive. Today, we dive into digital health, and digital health is transforming healthcare everywhere, from AI diagnosing diseases to telemedicine connecting remote villages with the city hospitals. Our guest is Professor Georgi Chaltikyan, a surgeon turned global healthcare expert who has advised institutions like WHO and European institutions. Get ready to learn how global lessons can accelerate our journey towards an accountable Hindustan where healthcare truly serves every citizen. I'm Dr. Gnaneshwer Reddy, and joining me, Professor Georgi Chaltikyan, founder of Armenian Association of Digital Health, creator of Masters of Digital Health program, and a trusted advisor to government and worldwide. Professor, you originally trained as a surgeon. What inspired you to leave the operating room and become a strong advocate for digital health on the global stage?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. Indeed, I was trained as a general and laparoscopic surgeon, and I spent approximately 20 years in medical practice, surgical practice, as well as an associate professor, teaching surgery and doing research. Basically, it has been a standard or typical career, let's say, a university medical person. How it all began with health information and communication technologies. Firstly, it's probably my love of technology. I have to confess, I've always been what you might call a technophile, an application of various technologies, various clinical domains, including surgery, such as, let's say, robotic surgery. This has always excited me and amazed me. I have to say that even early in my, basically we were just starting our journey as surgical residents in one of the largest hospitals in the city of Yerevan, which is capital of Armenia. And in that hospital, it was essentially mid-90s, 95, 96. And I remember that very clearly. And the hospital just got the very first PCs, personal computers. So one of those computers ended up at surgery residence room. A good friend of mine, a colleague of mine, yes, a long-time partner, because we've done surgeries together for a long time. So long, basically, a very long friendship dating back to, at least 30 years, more than 30 years. So we got that computer, that PC, and we decided, why don't we try to create something like an electronic medical chart? So basically mid-90s, essentially 30 years ago. And we just created a few templates, very simple, and essentially something that you might think of as a very primitive, homegrown electronic medical record. And that probably has been the starting point. But then, of course, I continued my surgical training, then research fellowship, then my PhD, all of that in relation to medicine and surgery. Then sometime mid-2000s, we came across a very interesting initiative. One of the major pathologists named Klaus Kaiser, a really big name in pathology from Germany, by the way, he visited Armenia a few times and he gave talks on telepathology and telemedicine. And this is how I got interested specifically in remote medicine, telemedicine, all of that coupled with this technophile approach, together with our more advanced compared to other folks working in the hospital. We were what you would call probably a little bit more tech savvy. We used computers already quite extensively. And of course, we kept thinking, we kept coming back to this idea, how can we use this technology to improve care? So long story short, mid-2000s, we got together, a few colleagues of mine, most of them also surgeons, still nowadays practicing in Armenia, leading top surgeons in various fields, we established the Armenian Association of Telemedicine. That marked the beginning of my journey into digital health. We quickly became member of one of the leading society in digital health, and that is the International Society for Telemedicine. We started raising awareness in Armenia. We collaborated with a few actors, government authorities. We consulted them on building the e-health agenda or e-health strategy for Armenia. And then eventually we conducted a few pilot projects in Armenia, connecting rural health centers to a hub in Yerevan. Different projects, mostly with international participation. And then eventually that collaboration, we conducted a few joint projects with the university in Bavaria, this Deggendorf Institute of Technology, we call it DIT, with one university in Armenia, which is RAU or RAU that you mentioned, and our association. And then eventually this university in Deggendorf, they were expanding, they were launching a new campus. And it was back in 2015. An excellent colleague and friend of mine, Professor Kunad, back then vice president of DIT for health sciences. And it had been his long-time vision to establish a study program in digital health, medical informatics, e-health. So he launched that program, they launched the new campus, and that colleague, friend of mine, he essentially invited me to build that study program. And this is how I relocated from Armenia to Germany, to Bavaria, where I'm currently based for most of my time. That was exactly the moment when I decided that I am going to completely veer from clinical domain fully into and dedicate myself to my passion, digital health. So that has been kind of the journey. And of course, after that, we started developing that program. I started it with 6 students 10 years ago. This year, we're celebrating 10 years of international unit that we call European Campus Rottaline. So 10 years ago, I relocated to Germany and took that position of Professor for Digital Health and the coordinator head of this master's program. Fast forward 10 years later, last year we had 1,810 applications into our Masters of Digital Health from all over the world, and we currently have approximately 300 active students right now, approximately the same amount of graduates that we've already produced. The program is in quite high demand, and we have students coming to us from more than 120 nations around the world. Everything taught fully in English, exclusively in English. And of course, we greatly benefit from the fact that education here in this nation is absolutely tuition free. So we don't charge any tuition fee. That's also part of the success. All these wonderful ladies and gentlemen, these great people, professionals or health and medical professionals, they come to Germany and they are getting trained in digital health. It is exclusively Germans' taxpayers' money that supports this. It's an amazing project. Then, of course, after that, I re-established this connection with Armenia, and I eventually re-imported that same study program into Armenia. So currently we operate it at both universities, DIT in Germany and RAU in Armenia, and we operate it as a double degree. So we have students from Armenia coming to Germany, doing few semesters, and of course, again, I have to mention that we enjoy funding support by Erasmus+, by European Union's major funding instrument.
That's amazing, Prof. I think you worked in Armenia, Germany, and beyond. You also mentioned in the early days of the electronic health records development, working with your colleagues. So how did seeing different healthcare systems influence your belief in digital health solutions? So how did you come to the point, this is not only the surgical room, but also I need digital solutions which can help enhance the productivity? And also in the early days, it's very challenging to think about digital health because there are so many skepticism. Even now, AI is skeptical for everyone. So how did you overcome your challenges?
Well, Indeed, the skepticism and lack of understanding, that is a huge challenge. And I have to confess, not to say that this challenge has been overcome, or not at all. Even nowadays, among many health professionals, frontline health workers, there is still quite a lot against the technology. One critical thing here is education and awareness. And that is why primary mission, if you wish, is indeed educator advocacy, but also, of course, strategy, policy development, and have probably a bit broader spectrum of interest. But first and foremost, I consider myself an educator. And I think it is of utmost importance to tell people about what digital health, how digital technology is capable of transforming not just healthcare, but our entire societies. I think it is when people understand that what we have today is not really matching as healthcare, or rather sick care. We have health systems all over the world. They're facing, of course, everybody knows, we're facing huge problems, huge inefficiencies. Many times people practicing care almost blindly because one size fits all approach, conveyor medicine, conveyor approach. Even the best health systems in the world, such as here in Germany. Now I always bring that example. I am enjoying, indeed, and I think people, all citizens of Germany, everybody living in Germany, people living in the Nordics, of course, Nordic states, France, the United Kingdom, US is fantastic, but there is a kind of a different sort of challenge. But let's take Germany as an example. I enjoy living in the nation that really can brag about having one of the best health systems worldwide, and actually one of the oldest, if we consider that the social health care can actually be traced back to the model that was initiated in Germany back in 1882. And it was right here in Germany where we even call it the Bismarck model, named after the then Chancellor of Germany, who first suggested something that eventually became what we call today social health insurance, right? Now, despite the fact that it's indeed an amazing system, similar to NHS, perhaps better in some regards. For example, the waiting times are quite disastrous in the UK, as well as in Canada, for example. Here in Germany, it is a bit less of a problem because it is eventually multi-stakeholder, very multi-actor, more kind of checks and balances, but that also makes that system, the system is very robust, very stable, but also very complicated and becoming costlier and costlier. We're already at 12% of GDP. And end result, I live here. If I want to book an appointment, let's say with eye doctor, eye care, or skin care, I may be indeed, even here in Germany, waiting months and months to get that appointment, right? Then eventually I come to the doctor. Doctor usually has approximately 5 minutes to talk with me. 5 to 10 minutes. On average, it is 6 to 7 minutes, right? And then while speaking with me, doctor oftentimes, and this has become already the reality, does not even look to me. Why? Because she's looking at the computer screen. Because she has to record a few things into the computer. So 5 minutes, I'm gone. How much information is a doctor, human doctor, able to get from the patient in 5 minutes? We understand that the healthcare becomes really inefficient. It's failing. I consider it a failure because if I am unable to describe to my doctor for as long as I think it takes me to explain my problem, then what is such healthcare indeed? And that is why we all end up then being prescribed something which is standard. And we know that that standard may be working, let's say, between 90 and 95% at best. It could be 60%. Pretty often it becomes just tossing a coin. Whether it will help or it will not. It doesn't help, come back, and so on and so forth. And now imagine that I have my personal doctor or 10 different personal doctors. And I can talk to these doctors day and night. And these doctors, they have seen not just few hundred patients, cases, like the doctor I saw the other day. But these doctors, they are my personal doctors. They have seen hundreds of millions of cases of patients. And they know everything about me and me specifically. And obviously, I'm speaking about AI doctor, because there is no human doctor who is capable, ever capable, of knowing as much as AI will know. In one of my recent talks to my students, I made a pretty bold statement. And I'm ready that a lot of health professionals are going to probably would not be happy. Let's put it in a mild way. I said, there is no such thing as absolutely professional human doctor. Full stop. And you know why? Because 50 or 70 years ago, it took 15 years for medical knowledge, entire medical knowledge, to double. Nowadays, it's taking 2 months, less than 2 months, for the entire information, entire knowledge related to health and medicine to double. So we're doubling the knowledge, we're doubling the information, the data, every 2 months. It is absolutely and utterly impossible for humans to continue performing as professionally as we would like them to, full stop. And that brings us to this vision of AI augmented or AI supported precision. I call it digital precision health. Because what we have had up to now, it is absolutely imprecise. And that's why we like so much this term, precision health. Because what we humans used to have as medicine or healthcare, it was as much approximation. What am I trying to say now is why we are losing literally millions of people annually due to preventable medical error. It is very hard to estimate, but we do have an estimate that globally preventable medical error might in fact be the third or fourth leading cause of death, if you consider it as a cause of death and not other conditions. The key paper, one of the landmark papers that triggered a move towards digitalization of health system was at the turn of the centuries, 2000s. The back then Institute of Medicine published a famous paper titled "To Err is Human." And it was that paper that first estimated and came to a conclusion that at least 100,000 Americans dying every year due to human-made preventable medical error. That was the boost and the push caused federal movement, quest towards digitalizing the health system in the US. One thing that I used to show my students in my public appearances or keynotes, short video fragments of different people's, the well-known folks, and most recently I've been showing fragments of tech gurus speaking about how revolutionary could artificial intelligence be in healthcare. One such very interesting talk was by Ilya Salskemer, the guy who was one of the founders for some time among the top management, the guy who had been instrumental in the latest developments in deep learning. He brings about an example. So the guy is absolutely a tech guy. He has nothing to do with health or medicine whatsoever. He's a computer scientist and one of the pioneers of the latest developments in deep learning. But the example that he brings of how AGI, artificial general intelligence, is going to revolutionize our societies and humankind and life on Earth, the one and only example he brings is healthcare.
Yeah.
And he says exactly that. Today, in order to go to a doctor, you are waiting for weeks at best. Then you come to a doctor. The doctor has a few minutes to talk with you. Then you get the have to be. Obviously, he was addressing the US audience. Thankfully, you don't get a bill in the UK. In NHS, and we don't pay here also. The expenses are still there. It just means that somebody else pays them. And then Ilya Sutskever says, and now imagine again that you have this AI doctor that knows that is fine-tuned to you, that has all data on you, and that doctor is capable of providing, and that doctor, which is also important, is going to cost pennies compared to human doctors. We should also keep that in mind. And then at the end of this short fragment, Ilya says something that I especially love and always cite. He says, when we achieve that, and it is probably going to be, my understanding, I would say a couple of decades from now, until that vision really becomes relatively mainstream, at least in some areas of the world. And I hate to say that, but unfortunately we're going to see some inequality probably there as well, because we have to face it. That is a different thing. So when that vision becomes reality, says Ilya, we look at today's healthcare and compares to what we have today, that vision would be the same as today's healthcare is compared to 16th century dentistry. This is quote unquote of Ilya Sutskever, and I could not agree more. And that is why I always speak of what we have today, broken, inefficient, killing a lot of people. We should be absolutely thankful to this mass healthcare that started mid-20th century, because that healthcare back then has been an absolute game changer. Of course, humankind would have not missed such level of development, including technology development, including cultural development that we have had in the 20th century. So it did work back then, but it's not going to work any longer. Also, because of sheer demographic and sociological changes. Back then, at least the ratio of doctors, the health systems quickly adapted. We started training many doctors. That is when we had to develop this standardization and this more or less standardized approach to treatment, because we could no longer afford individual bright minds behind the healthcare, because there were not enough stars to provide care for the rapidly growing population. So back then, for the 20th century, bottom line, it was okay. Nowadays, what we did build in the 20th century has to remain in the 20th century. And unfortunately, we are not yet even close to this vision of what should be 21st century. And I don't even call it healthcare any longer. I don't like calling it even healthcare, because healthcare is strongly associated with those outdated health systems of the 20th century. I like to call it 21st century health and wellness paradigm. And this is what I call 10P health, or digital precision health.
Wow, I mean, it's too much information to digest. You've mentioned so many times, Prof, preventive healthcare.
Right.
You also mentioned the AI, you mentioned AGI, artificial general intelligence. You mentioned enhancing the knowledge in the healthcare sector. As we are speaking about healthcare sector, we've been working on digital healthcare quite a long time, but the trigger moment was COVID-19. So everybody realized that COVID-19 is a trigger moment to switch over healthcare sector, maybe a little bit digitalized. And also we were working on healthcare data collection, at least after COVID-19, as of my understanding, because in India, we have paper-based system. So you will basically write on the papers, prescriptions and everything. And that follows collection of several records. I think in India, we have limited numbers of doctors, but waiting time is less compared to the UK, Germany, or any other countries. So let's imagine a hypothetical situation where we have accurate data. So every individual has the data, medical records, but also genomics data, various other data, variable data, and so on. Individuals' data, digital twin, you have AGI working to enhance the healthcare, and you have precision medicine. Are we also working towards longevity? So which means that are we going to increase our life expectancy from 70 years now as an average to 100, 150 years? Is this the trend we are going to see in the future?
Well, I am pretty convinced, my dear friend, that we are going to see that, not necessarily we, I mean our generation, but we as humankind. And this is indeed, you've pretty accurately described this vision that I call 10P health. And why 10P? It's basically, I have to, of course, credit here the person whom I consider the founding father of this approach. And that is Dr. Leroy Hu, the founder of the so-called system biology. And it was him who first suggested the term P4 medicine. P4 for predictive, preventive, personalized, and participatory. And then, some other predecessors of my 10P, they added a few more words, and I just, rounded up to 10. And when I say 10, I use the following words: predictive, preventive, personalized, precision, participatory, but also pertinent, proactive, pervasive, permanent, and platform-based. And indeed, it is the vision of every person eventually from birth collecting or generating individual data cloud, where data come from, as you mentioned, from genomes, number one, of course, that's the basis for everything. Then for other omics, right, the epigenome, transcript, other components. And thankfully, some of these are one-time texts, right, such as genome sequencing, for example. Now, on top of that comes what Dr. Lihoud refers to as phenome. And he even founded a company that is called now Phenome Medicine. So what he refers to as phenome is essentially thousands of various parameters, chemicals, right, that can be tested already today. So we have some sort of proof of concepts of that. So essentially, today it looks like as follows. You go to an institution or to a company that pioneers this 10P health, and there are some companies that attempt to do exactly that. So basically, they do a blood test, and they measure 5 to even 10,000 of different metabolites and different biomarkers in our body, in our blood. Now, after that, of course, then comes if or when a person goes to a healthcare provider, then electronic health record data, so on and so forth. However, I have to say that this approach, this vision, is essentially the one where I'm going to be bold and a little bit provocative here once again. It's the vision of health and wellness where conventional health systems and healthcare providers are going to play less and less prominent role. Why? Because eventually there will be technology that is available and affordable to every person, such as, for example, lab on a chip, or micro nano sensors that circulate throughout the body and collect data points, right? So they collect these gigabytes or terabytes of data. And all that data is being stored in the data cloud of that particular person. And that data cloud should be absolutely and unbreakably secure and safe. Because here we come to the point where meddling with that data or getting access to such data can indeed have catastrophic consequences for a particular person. However, on the other hand, a lot of that data has to be made available for the same AI models to get trained on. So essentially for research. Although I could eventually see a future where we have the pre-trained models that each of which is essentially then individualized and fine-tuned on persons, as you said, digital twin, on the person's own data. And then in that case, there might even no longer be such a need to make all persons' health data available to researchers, available to those who are training algorithms. You know where I'm coming from. Because a lot is going to be changing there as well. The algorithms eventually, we are already running short of data. Everybody knows that. We all know it, right? All these models. We have come to this tipping point where there is no longer data sufficient to train novel models. So there is quite a few potential avenues. Synthetic data, changing novel architecture. To be frank with you, I am also somehow inclined to think that these GPTs or transformer architecture that we have today is far from being an end of the journey. I'm absolutely sure that in the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to witness dramatically different things going on in AI models. These are no longer, we will no longer call them large language models. And then, of course, looking even a little bit further down the road, quantum AI. That is, I believe, where we are going to see indeed unimaginable changes. End result, all that data of the individual, wearables or other sensors. Today it's wearables. I have 3 of them or a few more, but 2 decades from now, it's going to be embedded, injectable in sensors, obviously, and especially these with nanosensing technologies, and then with quantum sensing. And again, now I'm again looking even further into the future. But the end result is something that I sometimes compare to autonomous driving, if you wish. There are different data being collected, right? The autonomous sensors or devices that collect data. That is the principal thing. In real time, as you mentioned, because it is absolutely, it must be obviously in real time. Today, we are absolutely unable to collect all data in real time because, for example, blood tests, all right, at best you can be going to that, or you have to be going to a brick and mortar institution to have your blood drawn for a test. And you have to do it, let's say, in most proof of concept projects, people were doing it, let's say, once per 6 months. With today's technology, we're unable to achieve continuous monitoring of chemicals in the body, right? But this is coming, and we'll definitely get there in just next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. I'm pretty sure about that. And all that data with the environment data, of course, creates your data cloud, which is continuously analyzed by a model that is fine-tuned on your own data. And all that data also creates what you mentioned, the digital twin, so that the model, the agent AI or AGI agent, your AI doctor, then is capable of defining in milliseconds which particular medication, in what dose, in what sequence, would work exactly the best for you based on your data and only your data, because your AI doctor has that digital twin and it can provide this data in microseconds. And then, of course, it's the continuous actionable recommendations. It's a continuous guidance of human throughout their life. And of course, when that approach becomes more or less mainstream, it will not be there overnight. Sam Altman often says that we will not have AGI overnight. It is the continuous development that at one point we will just find ourselves these quantitative changes, or maybe one or two significant technological jump, akin to what we've had with GPT, right? With transformer architecture. It gave us a technological jump. And then all of a sudden, we woke up in a ChatGPT era. But we know that they had been since 2015, 2017, let's say, transformer architecture. And before that, it's quantitative changes that all of a sudden give you a qualitative jump. And at that moment, when it becomes reality, of course, this AI technology would be able to predict what is coming, what could be the risks years or even decades from now. And that means that there should be actionable insights into how to change the behavior, for example, or how to eventually manipulate the person. Ray Kurzweil, the very famous futurist, so the guy who is said to have at least 80% of his predictions accurate. Now, his current predictions, they look insane, quite frankly. He already speaks of immortality. He's speaking of technical immortality achievable in 5 to 10 years. And this is what he calls a longevity escape, right? When life expectancy starts growing faster than we age. You know what I mean, right? So you have lived 1 year of life, but the life expectancy increased more than a year. And that is what they call this longevity escape. Now, Ray Kurzweil claims that we're going to get there in, let's say, next 5 to 10 years. I don't know, I'm not probably as bold or as brave as Ray Kurzweil, but let's keep in mind that 50% of that guy's predictions came true. 50%. And he also gives the example of back in 2007, maybe. He was in a room somewhere, and I think it was probably, he's talking about the very first iPhone. He asked people, how many of you think that we all are going to have this device on us? And guess what? There were, let's say, 15-20% people in the room who said that this is going to be a reality. 10 years later, smartphones are everywhere. So let us not underestimate this tremendous exponential growth of technology. So I am also a firm believer that sooner or later it will be there, of course. Witnessed a few times this kind of development. And I think it is absolutely inevitable that sooner or later we will have AGI, we will have health AGI, and we will have this digital precision health, or as I like to call it, 10P health.
Yeah. Okay, Prof. I think it's so much information again. Sorry, but I have a question around medical education. As you mentioned that we are going to enhance the knowledge, and in particularly medical education technology. You also mentioned that is a digital AI doctor is going to see us very soon enough. And there are also robots available for the surgeries. You also mentioned the waiting duration to see a doctor. And even though doctor is not going to look at us by just writing down some information, collecting data about the health problems we are going through and so on. With the AGI and digital twins and the data and precision medicine and so many buzzwords you mentioned, are we going to see a complete robots looking after individual people in the future, or do you see the medical profession? There was a doctor who was a surgeon in Armenia, and he tried to create the robots, and the robot took over the same surgeon in the future, and then that robot is treating a patient. The doctor, the Armenia surgeon who created the same robot, he's just looking at the robot and saying, okay, hey, are you taking my job? But you are precise. You are doing your job better than me. I have to read 1,000 papers every day, research papers every day. I have to communicate with various other professions to enhance my knowledge. But you don't have to do it. It's a robot with AGI, advanced information on healthcare. Do you see that trend is coming? And also, why do I say is because you can reduce the time every individual is. Maybe when you see a robot sitting just in front of you, the robot can scan you, for example, and see not only the healthcare records or EHRs we provide to the robot, maybe scanning you completely and verify whatever the health problems you already shared with him or with her from home, for example, and saying, okay, so this is the health record I have of yours. I'm just gonna scan you one more time to verify whatever the information you shared so that accurately I can treat you. Do you think we're gonna see in the future where a doctor created a robot taking over the job of the surgeon?
When we are trying to look into the future, I think we should be sometimes a little bit cautious in order not to sound too scary, at least. What I mean here is that if one were able to look further than, let's say, 1 or 2 decades into the future and be able to predict what that future is going to look like, it might be really scary for somebody who is living here and who knows only everything we have today. And you know why? Because that is the uniqueness of evolution and development of humankind, or development of the universe of our world. The development is relatively gradual. So if we consider what we have today compared to what we had 100 years ago, like Ilya said, 20th century medicine compared to 16th century dentistry. Now, if people 100 years ago had been able to clearly see what is going to be there 100 years later, they would have been dead scared. There's absolutely, I promise you. It does not work like that. Now, all that you mentioned, including robot surgeons, including humans being eventually replaced by AI or robots in many professions, including in medicine, including in surgery, this is absolutely no sci-fi any longer. However, it does not mean, once again, that it will be happening over time. Of course, it will be going on gradually. Obviously, we are not going to have fully autonomous AI without any intervention of human whatsoever in the nearest future. And when I say nearest future, again, I give it, let's say, roughly between probably 2 or 3 decades. I may be wrong. Maybe it's coming much faster. But once again, we don't want to scare people a lot. Now, sooner or later, anything and everything of what you mentioned will be there. The changes are going to be gradual. It's not going to be an overnight revolution. It's not going to be an overnight nightmare when all robots went out and started on the human surgeons and so on and so forth. There will not be these Frankenstein kind of scenarios. I am quite sure of it. But eventually, of course, these developments will be towards that. There is absolutely no doubt about it, simply because of what I mentioned in the first place, that we are rapidly approaching the situation when there is so much data, so much information, that it is absolutely impossible for any human to remain in a position of a professional, precise doctor. I clearly see all of that coming. But once again, it's not going to be a doomsday or a scary scenario. I'm pretty optimistic. Everything will be fine. And when this vision comes to life, but then, of course, after that, we also have to keep in mind that this progress is absolutely unstoppable and continuous process. There will always be room to further improve it, to make these nanobot interventions come true, as Ray Kurzweil says, genetic manipulation, and so on and so forth. Let us not just limit it to the observable horizon of the future, because otherwise we really get lost. But one thing is, bottom line, again, absolutely inevitable, is that a lot of human labor will be gradually replaced by AI and robotics. There will not be any catastrophe because of that. Humans will always find to do some stuff that robots are not yet capable of, until the point when there is eventually perhaps fusion between biology and machines. We want to be a little bit more feet on the ground.
Okay, Prof, I think you mentioned again about data, and I would like to play a devil's advocate. Data is now connected to human health, digital twins, and precision medicines, and preventive health care, and early detections, and so on. So it's so much of the data connected to complete human beings and the diseases. So my question is, in the future, are we going to see a war, a human war, using the data? Let's say now we use the machines. Take the example of Ukraine. You use the machines to bombing Ukraine or Russia. I'm not going to say who is right and who is wrong. Are we going to use the data in the future to not only the treating the patients, but in the other way around? So it is killing people. So it's not providing precision medicine, but rather we provide the medicine which is again
weapons based on the data, you want to say.
Simulating the data, changing the medicine, where AI can give different medicine rather than giving to treat the patient, and where involves so much of the data simulation, changes in the data, modification of the data, which involves in killing more people. Do you think that is going to be like one consideration we need to be careful about data protection policies?
Well, there is absolutely no doubt, and of course this is not discussable, not negotiable, that data protection, all these data security measures will be, or this is already prime concern, right, in digital health, and in everything digital, not just health, but especially health, because I mean, even if you lose your worst case scenario, bank account, money, even compared to losing money, losing all your assets, losing your health data, or being reaped of health data is, of course, much more catastrophic. So that is why there is absolutely nothing to discuss. Data protection, data security is and will forever remain of utmost importance. Now, once again, with data security, what can you say? There will always be criminals trying to get to that data and trying to manipulate, trying to meddle with individual data and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, for as much as we understand, again, we don't want to get into too much philosophy, but it looks like evil is there to stay. So we will always have some people who are attacking data, trying to access that data with criminal intent or with whatsoever. Now, you've taken it one step further. You're speaking about not even individual or not, let's say, data breaches, but you're speaking about essentially data wars. I would never say that this is absolutely impossible. Nobody, whoever is that, if there is a single person who can say that, no, we are absolutely safe and we have guaranteed future, or not at all. We can have something, going wrong about the same political situation that you mentioned, war, Ukraine, Russia, US, nuclear war, whatever. Is there any guarantee that something like that will never happen in the next days or weeks or months or years? No, of course. And that is my answer to all these doomsday scenarios. The simple and short answer is, of course, anything and everything is possible. Unfortunately, we may never say that we are 100% safe. Whatever, AGI going wrong. I personally consider that probability relatively low. Does that mean that absolutely impossible? No, never. And of course, they will, for as long as the, generally speaking, ethical, moral, cultural paradigm in the world, for as long as it has not changed radically and dramatically, and to our misfortune, I hate to say it, but I am not seeing any tendency towards a better, purer, cleaner, ethical, moral paradigm coming up in the world. So, to be honest, I am not super optimistic in that regard, nor am I too pessimistic, because at the end of the day, the development of human civilization has already demonstrated that whatever the level of evil, up to now, humankind has been able to avoid a catastrophe. Does that mean that we will always be able to avoid that catastrophe? Not at all. Is there anything we can do about it? Quite a lot, but not to 100% extent. Of course, what everybody has to do, and this is my firm belief, is that we can only fight evil by each and every one of us trying to increase the amount of good in this world. And if everybody, or if many of us try to follow that approach, I believe that at the end of the day, that the chances of a catastrophic consequence should not be very high. With regards to data protection, one more thing, just one thing, we're going to witness quite a lot of revolutionary technological developments here as well. We already know that with quantum, of course, the encryption, but it's also the other way around, right? If the quantum is able or is going to be able to break any conceivable encryption, let's say a few years from now, or perhaps already tomorrow, then the same quantum hopefully should be able to generate also a level of protection. Again, I am pretty convinced that we're going to have that continuous battle between attack and defense. It's probably not going anywhere. As to the global catastrophic events, yes, like I said, theoretically everything is possible. I am optimistic, and most importantly, we should strive and we should try every single day to just improve, to increase the amount of good in this world. And then eventually we should be able to overcome any level of evil.
That's right. I think always technology can find those radical data breach cybersecurity threats. And of course, we should also develop the similar quantum technologies, as you mentioned, to identify those threats and remove. So I promise I will be asking you 2 more questions and then we're done. So you mentioned so much about Professor Master's program. So my question is, how do you nurture entrepreneurs who can solve major gaps? Like you mentioned, doctor shortages in Germany, in the world, with the limited funding. I mean, we have very limited funding in healthcare, especially. But as you mentioned, in Germany, you have around 12% GDP, but in India is around 3 to 4%. It's recently a little bit increased, but still how do you think we can solve this one? How you are entrepreneurs through these programs solving these problems?
Yeah. Good question. Thank you for that question. Well, to begin with, we are not only focusing on building entrepreneurial study program, just to make it clear, because we have several tracks at the end of the program. We allow students to choose several paths. Among other paths, they are also obviously getting and developing product business development skills, essentially. However, what is there for all our MDH students? Now, my vision is designed to produce leaders in digital transformation, regardless whether they end up working for governments, for international or national regulators, or national ministries, whether they go into academia, whether they go into industry, whether they become entrepreneurs and to found their own startups. One of the key features, and in my opinion, one of the most important unique features of this study program is that we project-based learning. Invite students, we ask them to form teams with different combinations of pre-existing skills as well as courses that each student takes. So one takes management in digital healthcare, one takes entrepreneur module or course under this umbrella of project-based learning, another takes AI and data, another takes, for example, software engineering, software development. And they come together and they work on real world application. They have to, during one semester, so i.e. 6 months, design, develop, test from scratch and present a real world digital health solution. And in my thinking, this is the best way to try and to foster these young professionals to develop also a taste for entrepreneurial and a little bit, if you wish, even an entrepreneurial spirit. And we very much support it. I am absolutely convinced that with a few teams that are very close to establishing their own startups. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have these spin-offs, more and more of them coming down the way. And this is how we attempt to do it. We bring different people, different tutors, essentially, or teachers in this project-based learning, some of them from academia, some of them from industry, many of them with actual entrepreneurial activities, some of them even serial entrepreneurs. We invite also people from outside to give tutoring part of the study program as of an incubator, if you wish, of our own, an incubator or accelerator track within our study program, Master of Digital Health.
Professor, thank you very much for sharing all your thoughts, your journey from a surgeon in Armenia to a global digital health leader reminds us that compassion and the innovation can and must work together. Before we wrap, what is one crucial step our listeners, whether they are policymakers, doctors, or innovators, can take to move us closer to accountable Hindustan in healthcare?
I would say have a vision and be passionate about your vision, and then eventually we will get there.
Thank you, Professor. This has been an eye-opening conversation about how AI, AGI, and strong data policies can help us build fairer healthcare systems. And to our listeners, let's keep each other accountable and push for transparency, inclusive policies, and check out Professor Georgi's MDH program.
Master of Digital Health at DIT, Deggendorf Institute of Technology. And of course, I would also very much invite everybody who is interested in the topic to check our own series of events. We call it DigiHealth Day. It's a global forum for education, research, and innovation and networking in digital health.
Until next time, I'm Gnaneshwer, reminding you just healthcare isn't just a service, it's right, and we all share the responsibility to make it true, equitable. Jai Hind, and thank you, Professor, for your time.
Thank you for having me.